Matty Ice tore up Carolina's defense on Sunday, passing for a team record 503 yards and 4 touchdowns. Julio Jones had 12 receptions for a Falcons record 300 yards. As Atlanta beat the Panthers 48-33 on Sunday and are sitting pretty first in the NFC South. The totals by Ryan and Jones are the most ever allowed by Carolina. Cam Newton, meanwhile, left the game in the fourth and was evaluated for concussion symptoms after taking a hit from Deion Jones on a successful 2-point run. Was this more about good Falcons or bad Panthers, Stephen A?
Well, to me, it was about the bad Panthers. And, you know, I'll leave it to Max to discuss the Falcons because we know what a stud Julio Jones is. But let me be very, very clear about what I'm about to say. I will openly confess that it's an engagement in hyperbole. I'm being a little bit emotional at this point.
Okay.
Don't hold me to this next week. I'm only talking about what happened yesterday, okay? This is one of those moments where if I'm the owner, Mr. Richardson, I go home and I go like this. Should I fire Sean McDermott, the defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers? I know Gettleman made a mistake in getting rid of Josh Norman. We're seeing the value of a Josh Norman right now because understand that Julio Jones didn't even have a 100-yard, day against Josh Norman during his time defending against him. I remember last year, Max, I was doing NFL Countdown. I had a small segment on the show every Sunday, and one of the things that I loved about it is just hanging out with the NFL guys, the Chris Carters, the great Tom Jackson, and others just getting their knowledge, Keyshawn Johnson, the whole crew just getting the knowledge from the fellas, not to mention the guys that would come in and visit the show. And last year, Thomas Davis and Josh Norman both came in together in studio. And Thomas Davis was sitting there telling me, yo, man, this dude, Josh Norman, right here. This is before I met Josh Norman. This dude right here, this brother's on another level. He said, look at Julio Jones' numbers and see what he does against this guy. Because we know what a stud Julio Jones is, but against this guy, blah, blah, blah. So you hear all of this. Josh Norman's gone. You play against Atlanta yesterday, and you have James Bradbury and Daryl Worley, rookie quarterbacks on Julio Jones? What drug are you on as a defense? If I'm the owner, that man is in my office this morning. I need you to explain to me why you had rookies on this dude right here. 12 receptions, 300 yards? I don't care how good Julio Jones is. That's defensive scheme right there. That's strategy right there that elevated his ability to do what we all know he can do anyway. That, to me, is what this comes down to. The secondary for the Carolina Panthers is clearly missing something. I believe it is Josh Norman. Certainly, they've got other issues, you understand, offensively, particularly with protecting Cam Newton, who's gotten hit entirely too much. But even though I blame that concussion, he suffered on him. Lollygagging into the end zone like this ain't the NFL, and you can just stroll up in there like you pushing a stroller. So what the hell you think you doing? This is the NFL. That dude said, you ain't crossed the line of scrimmage yet. Let me put some wood on you. That's what happened. I blame that on Cam. But he has still been hit too much. He is not being protected well enough. That is a problem. Kelvin Benjamin, your #1 receiver, he is a problem. But ultimately, it comes down to this secondary. I know that the Atlanta Falcons have been impressive, but this is more about bad Carolina Panthers than it was good Atlanta Falcons.
First, I want to address what you said about the Panthers, and I'm going to move on to the Falcons.
Sure.
The Panthers aren't protecting Cam to the extent that they have in the past. Still a lot better line than, say, like Andrew Luck is dealing with right now on the offensive line. But the offensive line can make you look good or bad, and right now they're making Cam look bad. His receivers are also making him look bad. They're not getting open. They're not getting open. So that's also making them look bad. The defense is making the absence of the front seven is making the absence of Josh Norman much more glaring. Look, Josh Norman's an excellent player. If you lose an excellent player, usually you get worse. Still, there are arguments for why you don't overpay an excellent player. I understand why they didn't do it, but I don't even think the secondary is the issue right now. The issue for the Panthers is they can't get pressure on the quarterback. That's going to expose your secondary. They're getting no pressure, that defense, vaunted defense, getting zero pressure. And so the secondary is being made to look worse than it really is. And in terms of strategy, it's not a matter of who you put on Julio. It's a matter of how many. If you put one on Julio Jones, he is going to torch you. There is no such thing as one by themselves, you can put on Julio Jones. Same thing with Antonio Brown, which is why Odell Beckham Jr. must be looking at them like, oh, why won't anyone just single cover me all game? I mean, any of the other top receivers go for A.J. Green, any Des Bryant when he's healthy, put one guy on them, and they will get torched. I want to talk about Atlanta. First of all, Matt Ryan so far is having an MVP year. And yesterday he put distance between himself and the rest of the pack in terms of MVP stuff. Their offense is really high-powered. Stephen A., I would describe them as Steelers Junior. When you think about what they can do, they have an absolutely elite monster at the receiver position, Julio Jones, like Antonio Brown. They have an excellent quarterback, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, and they have versatile backs who can catch passes and do a lot of things in Freeman and Coleman in their case, and obviously neither one of those guys is Le'Veon Bell, and the Steelers also have D'Angelo Williams, but they're kind of set up the same way. Their defense isn't good. Maybe the Steelers is better, especially against the run, but their offense is so overpowering, they have a chance against anyone. Their total offense, they have better than 80 yards a game, more, not than the average team, than the second best team in the league. 80 yards a game better than second best? Let me give you an example of what that means. 80 yards a game is how much better second best is from 27th best. The difference between Atlanta in total yards so far, very early in the season, and the second best team is the difference between the second best team and the 27th best team. The offense is ridiculous. They can smoke anybody. The only loss, you're talking about who they lose to. They have one loss on the season.
They lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to open the season.
Week 1, which shows you, by the way, and even then they scored 24 points.
Preseason extension, though, a little.
Absolutely. This happens. A small sample sizes. It's troubling because you don't know what's going on. At the time, Jameis Winston's going to be the MVP this year, according to some, based on that performance. 3 touchdowns and a field goal is your worst, by far, offensive performance. This Falcons offense can do what they just did against just about anyone. And the fact of the matter is, Stephen A., they have this year. They've done it to everyone they've played. Panthers is the first defense that was supposed to be good that they played. But they did to the Panthers what they did to the Raiders, what they did to every team they played so far. That's a really good Falcons offense.
Well, it's a really good Falcons offense, but in order to be a good team, you got to be able to produce on both sides of the ball. They're 29th defensively. They're 30th in yards allowed. They're ranked second to last against the pass. And so when I think about that and I look at the 23 points that the Carolina Panthers were able to put up in the fourth quarter to make it interesting, to come back from a 31-10 deficit, to pull within 41-33 before Robert Alford intercepted Derek Anderson to end the game with his pick 6, the reality is that on far too many occasions, as we look at this schedule coming up for the Atlanta Falcons, I think the jury is still out. I think that it's been by default their success thus far. I'm not saying that they can't score, because anytime you got Ryan, who's high second tier, along with Julio Jones, who may be the second best receiver in all of football as far as I'm concerned, you have to give them their respect where it's due. But I also look at Carolina right now and the way that they've been struggling. They seem to be a shell of themselves right now. They don't seem to be in sync offensively. Defensively, their secondary is suspect. That wasn't the case last year, and that doesn't bode well for them. Getting back to Atlanta, let's look at who they have up next, Max. At Denver, at Seattle.
We're going to find out.
Good litmus test.
We're going to find out about them. San Diego, and then at home against Green Bay. And so 3 of their next 4 games was going to tell us a lot about the Atlanta Falcons, particularly when their defense is suspect against teams that could potentially put up points on them or neutralize them offensively. And we are going to find out. I'm not saying that they're not everything that people are projecting them to be. I'm saying the litmus test really arrives now, because the Carolina Panthers have been a shell of themselves. Don't bring me the Saints. I don't care that they won yesterday. Their defense has been highly suspect. It's all about Drew Brees. And, of course, the Oakland Raiders, which is the team we need to get into a little bit later, because obviously...
Real quick about Cam, by the way. Cam looks bad. He's holding the ball too... Not only is the offensive line not good, but it's especially now because the receivers are not open. Watch these receivers run routes. They're not open. Benjamin was supposed to help with that. He's not open.
It doesn't make any sense, because they did what they did last year without Kelvin Benjamin. You get your #1 receiver back, and you look worse offensively. There is something wrong with the chemistry that is the Carolina. And the last
You're supposed to be hungrier after a Super Bowl loss, not have an NFC championship hangover.
Last point I would like to make, too. Ron Rivera, I don't know if y'all have noticed, very nice guy. I really like him. Got a lot of respect for him. Did a fantastic job last year. seems ultra moody, highly sensitive, in a lot of different, don't want to answer post-game questions, talking about how he didn't get any information on camp specifically so he wouldn't have to answer questions to the media. They seem to be unraveling as an organization. This is not what we knew them to be last year. There's a level of stability that they had with Ron Rivera. I don't see that right now. I'm not saying they can't overcome it. They're too talented to be a finished product. But to put rookies on Julio Jones is nothing short of disrespectful.
One at a time, by the way.
Disrespectful.
Yeah. And maybe they're dealing with a lot more media with other issues, and that could also be
disrespectful.
playing a factor.
Julio Jones, rookies, one at a time.
500 yards for Matt Ryan through the air, 300 yards for Julio Jones.
It really was unbelievable.
He
that
went on
effort.
Skype with my man Prime Time, Deion Sanders, last night, and was sitting there literally laughing at her. I guess they, I guess they didn't know who I was. I'm paraphrasing it. That's basically what he was saying. What are you thinking if you are Sean McDermott? He would have some questions to answer.
I'm really excited that you brought up those two games, Denver and Seattle, though, to see what the Falcons do against those teams and kind of where they stand.